rescuers found a dog, curled up, warming somethings. What they found next left them in tears. A child, oh my God! Hans stammered, his voice cracking in the freezing air. Sophie stared breathless at the scene revealed beneath the German Shepherd. A little girl, no more than a year old, was curled into the dog's warmth, her tiny hand clutching its fur. Tears streamed down Sophie's face as she watched the exhausted dog Hannah gently nudge the crying toddler. "You kept her alive in this cold?" she whispered in awe before carefully lifting the baby into her arms, to discover the unbelievable story of how they survived like this. Video subscribe for more incredible tales and listen to the entire narrative. The wind in Germany's Black Forest was a blade sharp and relentless. It stripped the warmth from Elias's bones, leaving a familiar deep-seated ache. For 2 days, his Bergwacht mountain rescue team had been chasing the ghost of a missing hiker. And now, as a blizzard descended, they were losing. The forest was winning. "Track's end here," Ben, the youngest on the team, shouted over the gale, his voice tight with frustration. "Vanishes into this rock jumble." Elias didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on a dark space beneath a snow-laden overhang of granite, a small natural den shielded from the worst of the storm. His years as a Polizeihundführer, a K-9 officer, had taught him to trust a different set of senses. It wasn't a sight or sound, but a feeling, a density in the air, a flicker of life where there should be none. He raised a hand, signaling for silence. Slowly, he approached the opening, his crampons crunching softly in the snow. And then he saw it. Curled into a tight ball against the frozen earth was a German Shepherd, a magnificent animal, its classic black and tan coat matted with ice, its powerful body trembling with exhaustion. It was alive. The team's missing hiker, Gerhard Müller, was 72 years old. He wasn't reported to have a dog. Elias's mind raced. Had the old man found a stray, or had a stray found the old man? Easy boy. Elias murmured, his German soft and calm, the words he'd spoken to his own canine partner 1,000 times. "Ruhig, we're helping dir. Easy, we're here to help." The shepherd's head lifted. It didn't bark, but a low growl like the grinding of rock vibrated from its chest. Its amber eyes, intelligent and full of a profound weariness, locked onto Elias. The dog was guarding something. Elias braced himself. He expected to find the body of Muller, the grim discovery that so often ended these searches. But when the great dog, sensing no immediate threat, shifted its weight to better face them, Elias saw what it was protecting. His breath hitched, a painful, sharp gasp that the wind stole immediately. Chloe, the team's medic, let out a choked cry. There, nestled in the hollow warmed by the dog's own body heat, was a child, a toddler no more than 2 years old, wrapped in a thin, snow-dusted jacket. The child's face was pale, its lips tinged with blue, but its chest was moving in the shallow, rhythmic puffs of sleep. The scene was impossible. A living child in the heart of a blizzard, miles from any town, being kept alive by a dog that had no business being there. The question struck Elias with the force of a physical blow, silencing the storm itself. Whose child is this? 3 days prior, Elias's world was one of quiet, ordered solitude. Since retiring from the Landespolizei 4 years ago, his life had shrunk to the size of his small cottage on the outskirts of Freiburg. The looming shadow of the Black Forest, his only constant neighbor. At 42, he had the disciplined posture of a lifelong officer, but his eyes held a permanent watchfulness, a lingering sorrow. The cause of that sorrow lay buried in a small plot behind his house, marked by a simple granite stone blitz. Partner, friend, always faithful. The death of his canine partner during a botched raid had shattered more than just his career. It had severed a part of his soul. He'd finished his service, but the joy was gone. He couldn't bring himself to train another dog. The bond was too deep, the potential for loss too great. He joined the volunteer Bergwacht to keep his skills sharp, to impose a familiar sense of order onto the chaos of nature. He was respected for his tracking abilities and his unnerving calm under pressure, but he kept his teammates at arm's length. He was a rescuer, not a friend. It was safer that way. The inciting incident arrived not as a dramatic call to arms, but as a mundane alert on his pager. Hiker male, 72, Gerhard Müller, overdue 24 hours. Last seen near Feldberg Trailhead, Level 1, storm warning in effect. He stood by the window watching the first fat, lazy snowflakes begin to drift down from a bruised gray sky. It was the first significant snowfall of the season, the kind that catches hikers off guard, that turns familiar trails into treacherous, unrecognizable landscapes. He called the coordinator, Elias, reporting, "I'll lead the primary team." It was a choice. He could have let another team lead take it, could have stayed by his fire safe from the storm and the ghosts of the mountain, but the pull was irresistible. It was the call of the hunt, the structured procedure of the search, the clear, unambiguous goal, find the missing man. It was the only time his mind truly felt quiet, the only time the past receded. He packed his gear with practiced efficiency ropes, harness, medkit, GPS. Each item was a catechism, a ritual of preparation that walled off emotion. He met his team, Chloe, the calm and competent medic, and Ben, the young, ambitious climber, who followed protocols to the letter at the depot. An old man in a blizzard, Ben said, checking the clasps on his boots. Not a good combination. "We'll find him," Elias said, his tone flat, betraying none of the deep, cold knot of dread that had formed in his stomach. He wasn't just talking about Gerhard Müller, he was talking about the promise he had made to himself. After losing Blitz, he would not fail. He would bring them home. As their 444 vehicle clawed its way up the mountain roads into the thickening snow, Elias felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on him, a heavy but welcome blanket against the intrusive silence of his own life. The first day of the search was a methodical, frustrating sweep of Gerhard Müller's stated route. The snow was falling steadily now, a thick, wet curtain that draped the world in white and muffled their calls. They moved in a grid pattern, their brightly colored jackets, the only spots of life in the monochromatic landscape. By nightfall, they had found nothing but a discarded candy wrapper that could have belonged to anyone. They made camp in a small hut, the mood somber. On the morning of the second day, the storm intensified. The search was becoming exponentially more dangerous. It was Ben who found the first real clue. Over here, the backpack lodged in the branches of a fallen fir tree was Müller's pack. It was a significant find, but a worrying one. The contents were intact: water, a map, extra layers. Why would an experienced hiker abandon his gear? He must have fallen, Chloe theorized, scanning the steep, rocky terrain around them. Maybe he took the pack off to rest and slipped. They fanned out, searching the immediate area, but the fresh snow had covered any tracks, any sign of a fall. The trail was cold. Hours passed. The wind howled and visibility worsened. It was Ben who first voiced the harsh reality. "Elias' command is on the radio. They're recommending we pull back to the trailhead. The avalanche risk is increasing. We're searching blind." Elias knew Ben was right. The protocol was clear, but something gnawed at him. He stood near where the pack was found, his eyes sweeping the ground, looking for the subtle disturbances his training had taught him to see. And then he found them. Faintly, almost erased by the new snow, were tracks. Not human tracks. The prints of a large canine, a German shepherd by the size and gait. "The tracks head east," Elias said, pointing away from the steep drop-offs, away from the most likely fall zones. "It's a stray, probably," Ben argued. "We're looking for Muller, not chasing wildlife. The grid is west of here. A dog's prints this fresh mean it's been through here in the last few hours." Elias countered, his mind working, and a dog this size in this weather will be looking for shelter. It won't just be wandering. A complication had arisen, an unexpected variable that threw the entire search plan into question. Elias's instincts, honed over a decade of working with Blitz, were screaming at him. The dog was the key. He knew it with a certainty that defied logic. "We follow the dog," Elias declared. Ben stared at him, incredulous. "What, Elias? That's completely against protocol. Our search area is designated. We can't just go off on a hunch." "It's more than a hunch," Elias said, his voice low and firm. "It's a pattern. This dog is moving with purpose. We're wasting time here." The tension between them was palpable. It was a conflict between the rule book and instinct, between the new generation of rescuer and the old-school tracker. Elias made the call, a decision that put him at odds with his team and his superiors. "I'm following these tracks," he said, shouldering his pack. "You can stick to the grid if you want. I'm going this way." Chloe, after a moment's hesitation, nodded and fell in behind Elias. Ben, frustrated but unwilling to split the team in a blizzard, reluctantly followed, muttering about the report he would have to file. The stakes had been raised. They were no longer just fighting the mountain. Elias was now fighting his own command, betting his reputation and his team's safety on the ghost trail of a dog he had never seen. The trail of the German shepherd was their only guide through the blinding whiteout. For over an hour, they pushed eastward away from the designated search area, with Elias's decision hanging heavy in the air. Finally, the tracks led them to the jumble of rocks and the sheltered overhang where the shocking discovery awaited. The scene from the hook played out in its full, terrifying reality. The massive, shivering dog, the tiny, sleeping child. For a moment, everyone was frozen by the sheer impossibility of it. Chloe was the first to snap into action. "The child needs immediate medical attention. We need to check for hypothermia." But the dog, Kaiser, as they would later learn his name, stood his ground, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He was weak, but his protective instinct was a formidable barrier. Ben raised his ice axe slightly, a defensive posture. "No, Elias," commanded, holding up a hand. He saw not a threat, but a terrified, loyal animal. All the pain and loss he'd suppressed since Blitz's death resurfaced, but this time it morphed into a profound, focused empathy. He unclipped his helmet, letting the snow fall on his hair, making himself smaller, less threatening. He began to speak in a low, soothing monotone, using the old German commands he hadn't spoken in years. "Sitz, Platz, guter Junge, sit, down, good boy." He took a slow, deliberate step forward. He pulled a foil-wrapped sausage, his emergency ration, from his pocket, unwrapped it, and placed it on the snow between them. The dog's amber eyes flickered to the food, then back to Elias. The growl subsided. Elias sat down in the snow, putting himself on the dog's level. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just waited. After a long minute, the shepherd took a hesitant step, then another, and devoured the sausage. He looked at Elias, a flicker of trust in his exhausted eyes, before turning and nudging the small child with his nose as if to say, "He's yours now. Help him!" This was the turning point. Chloe rushed forward, gently scooping the toddler into her arms. The child, Leo, was cold, dangerously so, but he was breathing steadily. The rescue of Gerhard Müller was over. A new, far more urgent and mysterious mission had begun. As Chloe worked on stabilizing Leo, Elias ran a gentle hand over the dog's powerful back, feeling the ribs stark beneath his fur. "You did good, boy," he whispered. "You did so good. They had to get the child off the mountain immediately." But the mystery was maddening. As they prepared to move, Elias's eyes caught a small detail. Pinned to the zipper of the boy's jacket was a small enamel pin shaped like a cartoon bear. It was a logo. "Ben, get a picture of this," Elias ordered. "Send it to command. Tell them our priority has changed. We have an unidentified child, and we need to know what company uses this bear as a logo." The search had transformed. Elias was no longer just a rescuer reacting to a lost hiker. He was an investigator again, driven by a fierce protective urgency he hadn't felt in years. He was hunting for an identity for a family, for the answer to an impossible question. Looking at the brave, exhausted dog and the fragile child, he knew he was past the point of no return. He would not rest until he had the answers. The helicopter ride down the mountain was a maelstrom of controlled chaos. Chloe worked tirelessly on Leo, wrapping him in thermal blankets and monitoring his vitals. The child was whisked away to the university hospital in Freiburg the moment they landed. The dog Kaiser was taken to a local veterinary clinic, but not before he tried to follow the gurney carrying the small boy, a heartbreaking whine escaping his throat. The rescue depot was buzzing. The discovery of a live child had sent shockwaves through the local authorities. The search for Gerhard Müller was now a secondary operation. The criminal Polizei were involved, and Elias found himself at the center of the investigation, his past career making him an invaluable resource. The first lead was the enamel pin. The bear logo was traced to a high-end children's toy manufacturer based in Stuttgart. The police began the painstaking process of trying to connect the company to any recent missing persons reports, but there were no children matching Leo's description on any active list. It was a dead end. Days turned into a week. Leo was recovering in the hospital, a quiet, solemn child who rarely cried and seemed to be constantly waiting for someone. The local news ran his picture, but no one came forward. It was as if he and the dog had materialized out of the snow. Elias found himself spending his off hours at the veterinary clinic. Kaiser was also recovering, his strength slowly returning. A bond formed between the man and the dog, a silent understanding forged in the shared trauma of the mountain. Elias would sit in the kennel, and Kaiser would rest his great head on his knee. In the dog's amber eyes, Elias saw the same unwavering loyalty he had once seen in Blitz. The old wound in his heart began to feel different, not healed, but less raw. The pressure mounted. The media descended. Theories swirled: an abduction, a child abandoned by desperate parents. Ben, though now respectful of Elias's instincts, represented the lingering doubt. "We found Muller's body," he reported grimly one afternoon. "The other team located him in a ravine, died of a massive heart attack, coroner says. Just like we thought. The implication was clear. Kaiser had abandoned his dying owner. For a moment, Elias felt a flicker of doubt. Had he misread the dog's loyalty? Was it just a desperate animal seeking warmth? This was his dark night of the soul, a moment where his faith in his own instincts wavered. Then came the breakthrough. A police detective, a sharp woman named Frau Schmidt, approached Elias. We got a call, not a missing persons report. A family in Hamburg. They're worried about their son and his wife. They were driving back from a vacation in Switzerland, supposed to pass through the Black Forest. They haven't been heard from in over a week. The wife's credit card was used to purchase a toy from that Stuttgart company online, a gift for their son's second birthday. Schmidt's voice was tense. Their son's name is Leo. The air left Elias's lungs. Everything snapped into focus. They weren't looking for a missing child. They were looking for missing parents. Get the last known ping from their cell phones? Elias set his voice a low, urgent command. He looked toward the clinic where Kaiser was being held. And get the dog. He was there. He knows. The final act was set into motion. They weren't just looking for clues anymore. They were looking for a grave. A police convoy with Elias and a crated Kaiser in one of the vehicles crawled along a remote winding road that cut through the highest pass of the Black Forest. The area corresponded with the last cell phone signal from Leo's parents. The snow from the blizzard had been cleared, but deep drifts remained on the shoulders, hiding the landscape beneath. They searched for hours, finding nothing. The signal could only be narrowed down to a 5-kilometer radius. It was hopeless. Let him out, Elias said to Frau Schmidt. Let me walk him. Schmidt hesitated but nodded. Elias opened the crate. Kaiser emerged, shaking his powerful frame. He looked at Elias, then began to scent the air, his nose twitching. Elias leashed him, and they began to walk along the side of the road. For nearly a mile, Kaiser was calm. Then he stopped. His head went up, his ears swiveling. A low whine started deep in his throat. He pulled hard on the leash, not forward, but toward the edge of the road, where the safety barrier had been sheared off. He strained, looking down the steep, wooded embankment. Was es los Junge? What is it, boy? Elias whispered. Kaiser barked a single sharp, urgent sound. He pulled again, nearly yanking Elias off his feet. That was all the confirmation they needed. A rappel team was quickly assembled. Elias, refusing to stay behind, clipped in and began the descent down the icy slope, Kaiser's barks echoing from above. 20 meters down, hidden by a thick stand of fir trees and half buried in snow, they found it. A blue Volkswagen, crumpled and overturned. The climax was not a confrontation, but a scene of heartbreaking silence. Inside, they found Leo's parents. The crash had been violent, instantaneous for the father. The evidence suggested the mother had survived for a short time. In a final, desperate act of love, she had unbuckled her son's car seat, pushed open a door, and carried him a few yards away, tucking him into the sheltered hollow of a fallen log, before she too succumbed to the cold and her injuries. The full story was laid bare: a tragic accident, a mother's final sacrifice, and a lost, grieving dog, drawn by the cries of a cold, lonely child who stood vigil when no one else could. The aftermath was a blur of quiet efficiency and profound sadness. The story of Kaiser the Guardian became a local legend, a small flame of hope in a dark tragedy. Leo the miracle child was reunited with his loving grandparents, his life forever marked by the intertwined love of his mother and the loyalty of a dog. Kaiser was hailed as a hero, but his future was uncertain. He was evidence in a tragedy, a dog who had lost his own master and temporarily adopted a child. Elias visited him every day at the clinic, the unspoken bond between them solidifying. A few weeks later, Leo's grandparents asked to meet with Elias. They sat in a quiet hospital waiting room, their faces etched with grief, but also with an immeasurable gratitude. "We owe you everything," the grandfather said, his voice thick with emotion. "And we owe that dog. We owe him a life. But we are old. We cannot give him the life he deserves. He is a working dog, a hero." He looked at Elias, his eyes pleading. "He belongs with someone who understands him. He belongs with you." That evening, for the first time in 4 years, Elias did not drive home to an empty cottage. Kaiser sat in the passenger seat, his noble head held high, his amber eyes occasionally glancing at Elias. When they arrived, Kaiser explored the house, his claws clicking on the floorboards before settling down on the rug in front of the fireplace in the exact spot where Blitz used to lie. Elias sat in his armchair, watching the sleeping giant. He looked at the empty space on the mantel where Blitz's photo used to be a space he had never been able to fill. He looked at Kaiser, this creature of impossible fidelity, who had guarded a child in a blizzard, and in doing so had inadvertently guarded Elias's own broken heart. He hadn't just rescued a dog, he had inherited a legacy. The silence in his home was no longer empty. It was peaceful. He had found his way back,